Adventures, written by John Carcello and Mallory Page. Chapter 3. Calm the Storm. Everyone was sound asleep in the treehouse when suddenly the treehouse began swaying back and forth, causing everyone to startle awake at once.
What's going on?
Richard asked in a panic.
Look out!
Cried Jaylee.
What did you do, Richard?
Screamed Annalisa.
What do you mean, what did I do? I didn't do anything. Maybe the treehouse can no longer support your big head.
Richard yelled.
My big head? Nothing weighs as much as your ego,
replied Annalisa. Water suddenly came crashing through one of the windows, soaking Jasmine's shoes. Jasmine gasped.
My flats!
Just then, another wave crashed through the window, soaking her completely.
My hair!
Annalisa made her way to the window and screamed out of fear. The other kids raced to join her and screamed as well when they realized that they were in the middle of a stormy ocean. They turned around to see that they were no longer in a treehouse, but a boat with the disciples and Jesus.
Where did the treehouse go?
Asked Jaylee.
Look, I see Jesus!
Exclaimed Richard.
We must be in another story,
suggested Annalisa.
I look like a wet dog and smell like a dead fish. This is the worst,
Jasmine cried.
We could fall off this boat and get lost at sea and you're worried about how you look?
Richard asked, clearly annoyed.
People like Annalisa might not care about looking like this, but I do,
Jasmine said, looking at Annalisa.
I might throw you off this boat myself,
mumbled Annalisa. Suddenly, a huge wave crashed into the boat, and the disciples started shouting, ushering the kids away from the edge and towards Jesus, who was lying on a cushion sound asleep. One of Jesus' disciples looked at Jesus, and with his voice full of fear, asked,
Teacher, don't you care if we drown?
At this, Jesus woke up and spotted the children. Prior to responding to his disciple, Jesus looked at the kids and said,
You're back. Don't look so afraid. Surely you know how this story ends.
Jesus said to the kids as he stood up and faced the stormy sea.
Quiet! Be still,
commanded Jesus, and immediately the storm ceased and the waves subsided. Jesus turned to his disciples and asked,
Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?
The disciples didn't know what to say until finally one of them spoke up and asked the other disciples,
Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him.
As the boat drifted on under clear skies and a calm sea. Jayla spoke up and said,
I remember reading about this story, but to see it in real life is amazing,
Annalisa added. Jaylee noticed that Richard looked sad. Confused, she asked,
Richard, are you okay?
Fine, I'm fine, it's just...
Richard hesitated to continue.
Just what?
Jaylee pressed.
I'm just scared that I'm gonna wake up back at the foster home and this is all gonna be a dream.
Richard confessed.
I know what you mean. It's all so real and yet almost too good to be true.
Jaylee agreed.
Exactly!
Richard exclaimed.
Too good to be true? Let's not get carried away,
said Jasmine.
Yeah, after all, Jasmine's here,
jabbed Annalisa.
Wait, what?
Jasmine asked, outraged.
I miss my dad,
said Richard.
Whoa, what brought that up?
Asked Annalisa.
Annalisa!
Jaylee exclaimed scornfully.
What made you think of your dad, Richard?
Asked Jaylee.
He took me camping once before he got taken away. We went fishing on this lake and everything was fine. Until storm clouds rolled in and it started storming before we could get back to land.
Richard replied.
That sounds scary,
said Jaylee.
I know, but I wasn't afraid. I knew that as long as my dad was in the boat with me, everything was gonna be okay. I'd do anything to see him again,
Richard said with sadness in his voice. Trying to comfort Richard, Jasmine said,
I know what you mean. I'd do anything to see Jake again.
Everyone groaned in unison.
Ugh.
Jaylee placed her hand on Richard's shoulder, and they looked out at the water, unaware that Jesus was behind them, observing and listening to everything. Finally, the boat approached land. Annalisa cried.
Finally, I was beginning to get seasick.
As the kids got off the boat, Richard could hear Jesus teaching his disciples.
Little children, I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you so that where I am, you will be also,
Jesus said. This struck Richard to the core. Everyone who had promised to stay in Richard's life had abandoned him. Could Jesus be different than everyone else? Richard wondered.
Well, it's getting dark. I guess we better get back to the treehouse,
Suggested Jaylee.
To the treehouse. To the treehouse?
Cried Jasmine.
How about we get back to our house? I am sick of looking like this, smelling like this, and feeling like this. I miss my feather-top mattress, my electric toothbrush, my iced lattes, and most of all, I miss...
Interrupted as everyone groaned and said in unison.
Yes, most of all, I miss Jake.
Jasmine exclaimed unabashedly.
If it's any consolation, Jasmine, I bet Jake isn't even thinking about you.
Annalisa said with a smirk. Jasmine gasped.
Annalisa!
Jaylee scolded.
What? I was joking. It's not like I said Jake is probably with Emily right now.
Annalisa blurted out. Before Annalisa could reply, Richard chimed in.
Would all of you please just knock it off? It's gonna be dark soon and I don't want to sleep out in the middle of nowhere.
Richard snapped.
But we are in the middle of nowhere.
Replied Annalisa.
Richard's right. We need to hurry up if we are going to get back to the treehouse before dark.
Jaylee repeated.
I gotta tell you, Jaylee, you really stepped up in the absence of Harry and Big Jim.
Said Annalisa.
Well, thanks, although that's not saying much.
Replied Jaylee.
Yeah, I know.
Annalisa replied with a smirk. As the kids entered the treehouse, they were stunned to see Big Jim and Harry.
Hello, children. Did you miss us?
Big Jim asked menacingly.
Boy, are you all in trouble?
Added Harry.
But how did...
Jaylee started to ask, but was cut off by Big Jim.
We will ask the questions.
He snapped.
We will? I wish you would have told me that sooner. I didn't write nothing down.
Cried Harry. Big Jim ignored Harry and continued.
Jaylee, I'm not surprised to find these three here, but I expect more out of you.
But I...
Jaylee started only to be interrupted again by Big Jim.
You would think after all the privileges we give you kids, you all would think twice before running off.
Big Jim continued to lecture.
But we...
Again interrupted, this time by Harry.
Boy, are you all in trouble?
Harry repeated.
You said that already.
Replied Big Jim.
I did?
A confused Harry asked.
Yeah.
Big Jim replied.
I don't think I did.
Big Jim cried, clearly annoyed at Harry.
Anyways, you four, let's go. Time to go back inside the foster home.
Big Jim said, turning his attention back to the children.
Yay! We made it back!
Jasmine exclaimed, assuming they were back home. Just then, Richard spoke up.
Big Jim?
Don't backtalk me, Richard.
Snapped Big Jim. Richard tried to continue.
It's just...
I said, don't backtalk me. Let's go.
Big Jim insisted. Meanwhile, Harry walked over to the window and, looking out of it, began to panic.
Oh, are there camels at the foster home?
Asked Harry, clearly frightened.
What? No. Not outside of captivity, anyway.
Snapped Big Jim.
I was afraid you were gonna say that. Look!
Replied Harry, pointing out the window.
Oh, what are you rambling on about, you big dodo?
Big Jim asked as he headed over to look out the window. Seeing the camel, Big Jim thought he was going to faint.
I think I need to lie down,
he said.
That's what I've been trying to tell you.
Pleaded Jaylee.
Boy, are we all in trouble?
Said Harry.